They tried to control me one last time, not loudly, not aggressively, not in a way that would look obvious to anyone watching from the outside. That's how it always happened. Control never arrived as a command. It arrived as expectation, as assumption, as the quiet confidence that I would fall back into my old place without resistance. For a long time I had. If this story is touching you, comment below where you're watching from and what time it is there. I used to believe control looked dramatic. Raised voices, demands, power plays you could point to and name. But what I lived with was quieter than that and much harder to explain. It was the way decisions were already made before I was included. The way my objections were reframed as misunderstandings. The way silence was treated as agreement. And because I rarely challenged it, the pattern held. I learned how to adapt, how to anticipate what was expected of me, how to stay just agreeable enough to keep things moving smoothly. I didn't think of it as being controlled. I thought of it as being flexible. But flexibility has a cost when it's one-sided. Over time, I noticed how much effort it took just to stay calm. How often I rehearsed conversations before they happened. How frequently I felt tense, even during moments that were supposed to be ordinary. I was always bracing. Not for conflict, but for the next adjustment I'd have to make. Things began to change the moment I stopped shrinking. It didn't happen all at once. It happened in fragments. A boundary here, a refusal there. A decision to stay present instead of disappearing. Each small shift weakened the old dynamic, and they noticed. People always notice when control stops working. That's why the last attempt felt different. It came disguised as concern, as reason, as a reminder of how things had always worked. The tone was calm, almost reassuring, like they were doing me a favor by steering me back into place. They spoke as if my compliance was inevitable, as if this was just a momentary lapse I would quickly correct. I listened. And as I did, something became very clear. This wasn't about misunderstanding. This wasn't about compromise. This was about restoring control. For a brief second, the old reflex surfaced. The instinct to explain myself, to soften my tone, to find a version of my truth that wouldn't disrupt anything. That instinct had kept me safe once, but it didn't belong to me anymore. So I stayed quiet, not in retreat, but in clarity. I let them finish, and then I said, no, just one word. Not defensive, not emotional, not negotiable. The reaction was immediate. Confusion first, then disbelief. A slight tightening in the jaw, the subtle sign that something wasn't going according to plan. They tried again. They reframed it. They reminded me of obligations, expectations, history. They spoke as if the past still held authority over the present. And that's when I realized something important. Control only works when you agree to remember yourself the way others need you to. I'm not doing that anymore, I said calmly. There was no anger in my voice. No need to prove anything, just certainty. That certainty unsettled them more than any argument ever could. They weren't prepared for it. They expected pushback they could manage, emotions they could redirect, explanations they could wear down. What they got instead was stillness. The room felt different after that. Not explosive, unbalanced. When control stops working, the silence becomes uncomfortable. They tried one final approach, subtle pressure masked as disappointment. A suggestion that I was changing, becoming difficult, overthinking things. I listened, and I didn't move. No, I said again. This isn't happening. That was the moment it ended. Not because they gave up, but because there was nothing left for them to pull. Later, when I was alone, the familiar doubt appeared. Had I gone too far? Had I created consequences I couldn't undo? Would this cost me something important? Those questions had ruled my decisions for years, but now they felt distant. Because beneath them was something stronger, relief. For the first time, I wasn't negotiating my boundaries. I wasn't managing someone else's comfort at my own expense. I wasn't trying to preserve a dynamic that depended on my silence. I had stepped out of it. The days that followed confirmed what I already knew. There were no dramatic confrontations, no apologies, no sudden transformation from anyone else. But the control didn't return. The assumptions stopped. The pressure faded. The pattern collapsed. Not because I fought, but because I no longer participated. I noticed how much energy I had been spending anticipating reactions, smoothing tension, staying ahead of expectations. Without that weight, everything felt quieter, clearer. I wasn't louder. I wasn't harder. I wasn't colder. I was unavailable. Unavailable for manipulation. Unavailable for assumptions. Unavailable for dynamics that required my silence to function. That was the real shift. If you're rewatching this and you were afraid of what might happen the last time someone tries to control you, know this. The fear isn't about losing them. It's about losing the version of yourself you became to survive. And sometimes that's exactly what needs to happen. They tried to control me one last time, and I didn't fight back. I simply didn't return. And that changed everything.